I'm John DeDakis, and you're one-to-one with me. And I'm one-to-one with my friend Carine McCandless, who is off screen. There she is. Hi.
Sorry.
Well, and I have to say that, we apologize to everyone who was waiting. We were going to go right at the top of the hour, and you've been having a very busy day.
Yes, sir. I scheduled myself a non-busy day today for multiple reasons, but that's just not how my life works usually. So I apologize to everyone for having to wait for me. I'm so sorry.
Well, there's really no apology necessary because it's good to see you at any time.
Thank you.
So tell me, this is, there are some people who know you really well and have been following you for a long time. You and I have known each other for about, I don't know, since 2011, I think, or 2012. Yeah. We met at the Hampton Roads Writers Conference, and it was right after my son died. So I was like in a blur. It was just not good. And as it turns out, you and I both have some deep sadnesses. And in your case especially, you almost have had to live it out in public because your older brother, Chris, died along in Alaska and became the subject of John Krakauer's Into the Wild, which is required reading, has been required reading for decades, I guess, in high schools. And so then you've had a chance to go around and talk to people about it. So, and this is a particularly auspicious day because on this day in, what was it, 1992, it's the day he died in the bus. And so there are some people who know your story really well, but maybe there are others who need a refresher. So tell us briefly a little about your relationship with Chris and how it is that it came to be that his story has become so compelling to so many people.
Well, I mean, that's John Krakauer's fault, as we always joke. And I mean that in a kind way. John writes about this in the beginning of his book, Into the Wild, in his author's note. When Chris was found, Outside Magazine, sorry.
Is it, it's even after 28 years, it still gets you, right?
It does. And I thought this, staying busy is a good way to always get through it. And that's always helped. And today is no different than any other, I guess. It still hurts every day, but the public presence of today is it just kind of elevates everything. Yeah. And with the bus recently being removed, so that sort of brought everything up to, my nice quiet summer has become a non-quiet summer. But yeah, so John Krakauer was very well known in the world of extreme mountain climbers, and he was very well respected as a writer and a journalist, and he was assigned the story for Outside Magazine. And he was very intrigued by the story and really became obsessed with it. And I don't want to speak for John, but I'm just saying this based off of what John has said publicly himself and what I know from working with him so many years. And he was very drawn to Chris's story. He had to write the Outside article. It was called Death of an Innocent. A lot of people are probably familiar with it. And he had to write it on a tight deadline. There were a few facts that he had gotten wrong in the magazine article, as reporting that Chris mistook a caribou for a moose and that he had actually shot a caribou, and turns out to be he actually did shoot a moose with his .22. He didn't know how to preserve the meat properly, which is a great tragedy that he talks about in his journal. But the article that he wrote for Outside generated more mail to the offices of Outside Magazine than any other article in the history of the magazine. So that, along with John's own desire to know more about the story, he contacted my parents and asked for the rights to turn that article into a full-length book. So I had found out that after the fact. John had contacted me and let me know that he had this agreement with my parents. And I wasn't really very, I'm a nice person, but I'm very protective of Chris. So I would say that I probably wasn't very open. Maybe not, I probably wasn't super nice.
Why were you trying to protect Chris?
Well, he had an agreement with my parents, and I, no disrespect to them, it's a horrible thing to have to lose your child. It's a worse thing to make your child feel like they can't have you in their lives. And I say that from personal experience. But I was concerned that the truth would be honored and that Chris would be honored, and the truth was very important to him. So I was very skeptical when I first spoke with John. But he asked me a lot of questions. He asked to come and meet me and talk about Chris. And I have to say that upon meeting him, I was just really struck with this sense of trust, and that he really wanted to understand Chris and Chris's story on Chris's terms, and that he felt there was more to the story. And we had a lot of lengthy discussions. He shared a lot with me while he was writing the book. I pretty much consulted with him as he was writing, because he.
I'm gonna interrupt again. Let me back up, and let's at least look at Chris's Odyssey, I guess you could say, because what ended up happening is that he basically cut his ties to civilization on his own, and ended up backpacking, I guess you could say, hitchhiking, making friends along the way, finding himself, and he ended up in Alaska. And so talk a little bit about his Odyssey from what you understand, based on being his little sister.
Well, he graduated from Emory University with honors. He was very, very smart, very bright. He succeeded at anything he tried to do, and that probably, being a young man, probably got him into a little bit of trouble. Chris didn't have a big ego at all, but he had a lot of confidence, and he'd earned that confidence because, again, if he wanted to learn something, he could learn it. If he wanted to try something, he could do it. And he also, through our childhood, he felt very driven and very pushed to prove himself and to prove his worth. And so when he graduated college and my parents and I attended his graduation, he had told me that he was going to disappear. And he, after graduation, or right up until graduation, he and I were sending letters back and forth. And, he had let me know what his plans were, to the extent that he knew them. I mean, Chris really believed that if you plan everything out into exact detail, it takes the adventure away, because it's better to have a new, as he would say, a new rising sun every morning. And so, but he knew he was going to go west. He knew that he was going to travel. He knew that he wasn't going to talk to our parents again. And so we talked about that in some detail through the letters. And
How did you feel about that? The fact that he was going to sever relationship.
I understood it, based on our childhood. And
did you try to talk him out of it?
No.
Why not?
There was no. I mean, I'm the kind of person that believes that everyone, whatever they have to find peace with in life, they have to do in the way that suits them. I mean, Chris, some people view his actions as selfish, but it wasn't an act of selfishness. It was an act of self-awareness. And when I work with students, as you said, I talk with students. It took me a very long time. It probably took me at least 15 years before I accepted the first invitation to go work with students. But when I did that, I saw what an incredible impact it had on the students to have the rest of the story and to fill in all those blanks that were left. And it was my fault that those blanks were in Into the Wild, because when I shared all of these details with John, and I told him almost everything, and I let him read Chris's letters, which I had never let anyone read before, and the letters that I just referred to that Chris had written to me from college, about what his plans were and why. And I wanted him to understand Chris, but not write it down. And I also didn't think anybody was going to read the book. I mean, I didn't realize what a disservice I was doing because John was not a well-known writer as far as, globally. Into the Wild was his first big bestseller.
What year would this have been? Here's the book. Many of people are probably, seen it.
This is the original cover. I think you just showed the movie cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 1996, Chris passed away in 92. 96 is when Into the Wild was published. And it became this huge bestseller. It's published in over 60 countries, I think 38 languages. I did not expect that. And my parents kind of held the book up and said, like it's as if it was the Bible, and said, it's not in here, so it didn't happen. And I really
what is it that they're saying didn't happen?
Just the issues of, I don't want to get too far into the details. I wrote a whole book about it. But
which is this one.
Yeah.
It's called The Wild Truth.
Yeah. And I say that not to try to advertise the book, but thank you. But by saying
somebody's got to do it.
It took an entire book to write all of that out. So I don't want to take that many hours of everyone's time today. But we grew up in a very, a dysfunctional family. There was a lot of, we grew up in a home that was wrought with domestic violence, and those are issues that affect children a great deal. So things that we witnessed and things that happened to us, and various levels of domestic violence and abuse. But again, certainly not, there were some things that were extreme, but I mean, I work with domestic violence prevention organizations all over the country, and Chris and I certainly did not have a difficult life compared to many people. Simply the fact that we were born in the United States made our life much easier than many people.
What was the age difference between you and Chris?
He's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah. But
and it's always hard for the oldest. The oldest has, it seems to me, the big burden of, trying to figure it out. The parents are trying to figure it out. And so, it's just hard being the oldest anyway, but he was sort of your protector and you looked up to him, definitely. And I'm sure you expected that you'd again see him, he wasn't severing a relationship with you.
No, but those were the days. I mean, there weren't emails. When I work with students now and they say, aren't you just kind of pissed that he didn't send you a text or an email about what? And I sort of like, we didn't have these back then. And they look at me, he looks pretty good for being 150 years old. Trying to explain to students that those items that they're so used to, that they've just grown up with, didn't exist is it's just something. It's like trying to explain to them that there wasn't oxygen in the air or something. It's just not really something that they really. So
if he had done the same thing in this day and age that he did back in the 90s, do you think he would have also gotten rid of his phone?
I do.
Yeah.
I try not to speculate about things like that. People ask me all the time what Chris would think of the current political climate and things like that. And I can tell you about things that he thought of back then, and I can have those discussions, but I think it's incorrect to speak for Chris. I mean, in my book, I made sure to put excerpts of his letters so he could speak for himself. I think that that's the best way to respect him, is to allow him to speak for himself. But again, the issues that we grew up with, and you talk about him being the oldest, I'm actually the youngest of 8 children. So there's 8 of us. And that's something that is Into the Wild, but it's very, again, mostly my fault. And I did that to protect my parents and my siblings, and for us to be able to grieve in peace. Again, I didn't think Into the Wild was going to be a very big book or well known, or that many people were going to read it. And
you're gonna hate me for this because I'm going to interrupt again, because I know you can hold an audience for an hour and a half and not have anybody ask questions. So you've met your match here, ma'am. Um, um, help me
it's
understand.
important for me for people to understand that I acknowledge my other brothers and sisters.
Fair enough.
We have the same father and we have different mothers, and Chris and I had the same mom, and the ages of all 8 children are intermixed. So long story short, my mother was my father's secretary. We were born while my father was married and having children with his first wife. My parents did eventually get married when Chris was 6 and I was 4. And both families dealt with the same levels of abuse. I think that that household in some ways dealt with even worse abuse. So when you say that Chris being the oldest had the worst, he actually wasn't the oldest. So in our
thank you for clarifying.
In our household, he was the oldest. And we did know our brothers and sisters growing up and would spend summers together, but we were little kids and we don't understand how children are born. And so the lies that were told to protect my parents' reputation, they didn't want people to know they had an affair. Yet one of my stepbrothers, and we don't call each other step, but for clarity, one of my stepbrothers is only 3 months older than Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So for them to say that an affair didn't happen when you have that mom being pregnant and my mom being pregnant at the same time. So
do the math.
Yeah, we would just sort of look at facts and to not acknowledge that, and things happen. People make mistakes and it's okay. But I think it's just important. I certainly have made mistakes and I talk about that and own those things in my book. And I think that it's important for all of us to acknowledge just the truth of matters and everything in life, because that's how we learn. That's how we improve, and that's how we do purposeful work.
And so you mentioned that Chris was really on a mission of self-discovery, and that he had severed ties with the family, or at least with the parents, and at some point, not severing ties with you, but at least communication stopped. And right. He went into Alaska.
Come back. I mean, I had left home as well. That my 18th birthday at midnight, I left home. When I legally could get out of that house, I left.
Yeah. So what happened to him in Alaska? How long was he there? And for lack of a better way of putting it, why did he die? How did he die?
Well, he survived for 113 days. Looking at his journal, I think that he had a goal of being out and living off the land for 100 days. There's so many details with that, John. I mean, part of acknowledging the truth of the matter and mistakes is, Chris was underprepared. There's a lot of people like John Krakauer and Roman Dial and people who are well respected in Alaska that have a lot of respect for what Chris was able to do. And the fact that he, it's something to be said. He actually took a moose down with a .22. Well, okay, as impressive as that might be, he didn't know how to preserve the meat of the moose. So he took that life, for no purposeful result. And if he had been able to do that, he wouldn't have had to eat the things that he ate. And he had an edibles plant book, and he was following along what it said. And John has an entire, probably in the one that you held up, and in this, there's so many versions of Into the Wild, but there's an entirely new afterword if people are interested, because it just would take way too long to explain it. But there's a new afterword in the book that explains fully, what John has discovered through, I'm going to use the wrong scientific term, but gastrospectrometry, basically analyzing all the things that Chris wrote in his journal that he believed are the reasons that he passed away, the things that were toxic, and that he was already in a weakened state and he already had lost so much weight. And those things had done him in. But, if he had been able to preserve all that moose meat, he probably could have waded out the Teklanika River. That's another thing. He wasn't familiar enough with the seasons in Alaska and how the glaciers were going to melt, and how that river that he went across without much problem when he walked in, and I believe that was April, how much harder it was going to be to try to get out in July and August. So again, it's just, it's something to be said. People need to be prepare. But as John said, that was kind of Chris's plan, is to throw away the map, throw away the phone, right? If he had one, as you referred to.
Right.
He wanted to do everything and make it as much of a challenge as possible.
Right. So how long after he died did you learn the news?
September 6th.
So about a little less than a month, few weeks.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I travel around and talk to all these students, and I can separate that when I need to, because you can't get the work accomplished if you're breaking down. But it's sitting in my own house. Apparently it's a little different, with my daughter that's named after him running around in the background. So we believe that he died on August 18th based on his journal entries. And we received a phone call. My oldest brother, Sam, who's 12 years older than me, called and said that they believed that they still had been doing the dental records to confirm his identity, because of course he went by Alexander Supertramp, his trail name, which I think sounds silly to most, but if you've ever hiked the Appalachian Trail, we all have trail names. Chris was young, and he was an excellent writer, and he would write about himself in the third person because he planned on writing a book. And I guess in some ways John wrote the book that Chris never got to write for himself. I certainly wish that Chris had been able to write it himself about his own thoughts.
What would you say are some of the lessons that you've learned from Chris, based on not just growing up together and in the household you grew up in, but the lessons that you've learned reading his journals? How has his life, in a sense, affected your life and in any way defined who you are?
So it's interesting. When I first accepted an invitation to start speaking at schools, I didn't expect them to be asking questions about me. I just thought I was going to go and talk about Chris. And that's exactly what they wanted to know, is the question you just asked. The students wanted to know, well, how has it affected your life, and what did you learn? And, I think some of the most valuable lessons you can take from Chris's story is that you're responsible for your own happiness. And that you have to be accountable for your own mistakes, and you have to learn from them. And just to get the most out of every day. I mean, Chris died at 24 years old, which is such a tragedy. The amount of living that he shoved into those 24 years. There are many people that lived, well into their 80s and 90s that unfortunately don't have the same wealth of life, I guess I would say. And I get into that rut as well. I mean, it's a beautiful day today, and I've been so extremely busy, and I planned for myself to not have to have a busy day and to just do this. And it just didn't happen that way. I mean, a couple things exploded with different jobs I'm working on. That just happens, things that you can't control, but you have to help put the fires out when they happen. And, but I could kind of hear Chris laughing at me a little bit, like, it's been raining nonstop here. It's been crazy, terrible weather. And of course, today's a beautiful day. And all I should have done today is wake up, worked out, grabbed the kid, and honored the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, Chris also dying at 24, he didn't have a career yet, didn't necessarily believe in careers, but I think he would have had one. He didn't have kids, he didn't have a mortgage, he didn't have a car payment. I mean, but there's plenty of people at 24 that do have those things. I mean, Chris decided how he wanted to live his life. And he worked very hard. He paid for his own college education. So people thinking that he had everything handed to him, that's not the case. He worked very hard all through high school. He saved money.
Let's talk a little bit about the experiences that you've had talking with students, because as I mentioned, Into the Wild is required reading a lot in schools. And so you've had a chance to see the impact the book has had on, and Chris's life has had on young people, people who are just coming of age, just trying to figure it out. Based on the conversations that you've had with students, what's the takeaway, if you can in any way summarize it, that his life has had, what the effect his life has had on other people?
So I hear from people, I mean, I get messages still every day from people all over the world in multiple languages. Still every single day I'll get probably half a dozen to 10 today. Well, probably more today, but I would say the commonality in the messages that I get, because it's from all age groups, it's from all religions, it's from all ethnicities, it's from all political views. The messages that I get are overwhelmingly always about this motivation. You know, Chris can't change someone's life. I hear that a lot. Chris changed my life, and I respect that and I appreciate that. But really, when I listen to their story, what they're saying is that Chris was the spark for them that motivated themselves to change their own life and inspire them to make changes in their life in a positive way. And oftentimes it's someone that is just they hate their job and they're in the grind and they finally decide, you know what, I don't like this job. I want to go do something that I really want to do in life. I want to do purposeful work, or I just want to do something that I enjoy getting up and doing every day. And they make real changes, or they're in toxic relationships and they pull themselves out of those toxic relationships. I travel a country to do a lot of keynote addresses to raise money for domestic violence and child abuse advocacy groups. And overwhelmingly, I hear from people who just that. I mean, they want to honor each day. They want to live life. They want to protect their children. Sometimes people get too tied to the comforts of life and thinking they have to have the big house or they have to have the nicer car and all these things. And Chris kind of, again, he did this at a young age before he had those responsibilities on him. It's easy, I know, to say, well, just walk away from those things. But he never took those on. Would he have done that later in life? I don't know. But I think he would have done it in a way very similar to those that I know that are in their 60s that have just really focused their priorities in life. He really would have stayed away from material needs kind of driving his life and what he needed to do each day. I think that he spent a lot of.
I mean, it was 28 years ago that he died. So really he has been dead longer than he was alive. And yet his life has not only impacted other people, but you as well. And the thing that is, I mean, you're the keeper of the flame, really. And it's,
I'm the real connection, but I wouldn't say giving me the credit of being the keeper of the flame. I mean, his story is so well known, and the messages that I receive from people every day, they're the keeper of the flame. I mean, I'm their connection to Chris and to that real story, but yeah, you can't give that credit doesn't sit with me for sure.
Okay, fair enough. But you have catapulted the issues that he was dealing with and hadn't articulated quite as, that hadn't even come out in John Krakauer's book. You have taken some of those issues and given them a greater degree of clarity, let's say, that has, I think, benefited probably thousands and maybe even millions of people. And that's got to be a surprise to you and maybe even overwhelming. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
it does get overwhelming at times, but I mean, I had to own up to that.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
Well, because John respected me as a source, and he respected the protection that I was trying to keep in place. My parents deserved that space to grieve, but also I just knew that my parents were going to learn from his death. I knew that they were going to resurrect the relationship with their other 7 children because, they don't have a relationship with any of their kids. And I didn't want him to die in vain. And I thought Chris not dying in vain had everything to do with the small little circle of my family and my parents learning from, I do not blame my parents for his death. Chris put himself in those precarious situations and he took accountability for that. But I certainly hold them accountable for his disappearance and leaving the way he needed to leave. And that's a different thing. I think not allowing, John's a journalist, so I know that it was a big struggle for him to not write everything down. So he had to balance that with respecting my wishes and being respectful to the family. But when my parents did utilize his book as the full truth, because it was in print and it was a huge bestseller and it was made into a movie. So obviously that's the whole truth. That's not how that works. So, it took me 20 years to sit down and decide that I needed to write the rest of the story. And it's not something I ever planned on doing. In fact, I worked as a consultant and a script writer to the film. The writer director was Sean Penn. And I thought that was going to be enough. Like, that'll do it. But I really had to suck it up, and I had to own the responsibility of not sharing the full story. I was 21 at the time. I know that my intentions, I always try to judge people off their intentions. My intentions were good, but it was a mistake. And when I get messages from people that have read my book and the things that they have learned from it and the way that it's helped them cope and understand that they're not alone and leave dysfunctional situations and protect themselves and protect their children. People that say, oh my gosh, I knew there was more to the story and thank you for filling in the blanks. I'm very grateful for those messages. And then there's a part of me that always feels, gosh, if you had done that 20 years earlier, how many more people could you have helped? But at the same time, I wasn't a mother yet. So many of the lessons that I learned from Chris came from becoming a mother, and so many things that I had a greater understanding of with regards to my relationship with my parents. And a lot of that came from advice from my brothers and sisters before me. But so much of everything came full circle to me when I became a parent, because I couldn't understand not loving your child enough to never make them want to eliminate you from your life. And I don't mean like the typical teenage angst and things like that, but that wasn't Chris. Chris was not some typical teenage rebel, and that's why he left. That was not the case at all.
Let me ask you this. This is almost, I don't know, it's a sort of a philosophical question, but I hope it has a practical application, because certainly we've been discussing painful experiences, painful feelings, and grief is something that you and I have both experienced, and it's not one of those things you can snap out of. That just doesn't happen. And so here's my question, because you've had a chance to talk with a lot of people who are in dicey situations. And my question has to do with the relationship between grief and fear. Is there such a connection, do you think? And if so, how does that dynamic play out?
The relationship between grief and fear.
Yeah.
Now, you're familiar with me professionally, and you know that I don't have a degree in psychology, correct?
Yes, I don't either. So, but these are emotions that are human emotions, and I have a perspective on it, but everybody's experience is different with fear, with grief, and fear is part of life. Go ahead.
Chris always said to me that everything in life that happens to you has an energy to it. Everything that happens to us has an energy to it. And it's our responsibility to take that energy and to utilize it, use it as a fuel. And you use that fuel to launch yourself. And you launch yourself into a positive or a negative direction. And sometimes you'll make a mistake, and that's okay, as long as you acknowledge that and you learn from it. And it's okay to go backwards and turn around as long as you keep moving. And I think that it's just extremely important for people to try as best they can and get counseling where they need to be able to harness that energy that they maybe put onto themselves, that is grief, and try to do something purposeful with it as much as they can, whether that's purposeful on the scale of just in their own lives, in their own family, at their church, in their own communities, or on some big scale where they're in contact with people because of things that have tied to their lives.
Let me interrupt for just one quick second. And that is, do you think that it can be fear that can be that impediment that keeps people from leaving a toxic relationship or branching out in an area, going into the wild, figuratively, in terms of finding a new job and stuff? So that's, then that's the question, I guess, where fear comes
you're
in.
Choosing to allow fear to deter you.
What do you mean? Or let me put it another way. How do you overcome it? How do you?
Well, I mean, I can only talk from my own perspective.
Fair enough.
And I mean, my parents did raise us in a way that gave us the gift of having confidence. And I don't know, when I see a hurdle, and this is just my personal, I can't tell there's other people that are dealing with things in life that are so much more difficult than anything I've had to deal with. And there are those that are having so much more difficulties dealing with things that people would say are much minor, but it's all perspective, right? And it's all in how you can personally handle things. So there's no one answer. I think that you can overall, in general, say that, again, you can't control all the things that happen to you in life, but you can control how you react to those things. And that is a choice that everybody has. But it doesn't mean that it's always easy to overcome those things. I mean, I have a fully functional mind and limbs and simple things like that. It's easier for me to overcome some things than other people who just, who are simply born without everything function. I have a daughter with Down syndrome. She's fearless, but she can't overcome everything. I can't just say to her, well, suck it up and use that energy for good and overcome it. I mean, her brain doesn't function the same way, So it's like saying to someone that's blind, just open your eyes and look. So, you have to really be more understanding of everybody's personal perspective. So I don't want to generalize, but I do think, in hearing from people all over the world, generally what they get from Chris is just this inspiration of motivation. And they have to apply that to their own perspective and their own life and their own limits. And fear is a big part of that. So sometimes you're afraid to leave a relationship because you don't want to be alone. Well, if you're in a toxic relationship, if you're in a relationship that is harming your children, your number one role, my belief, is to protect your children. Like, being a mother comes first. So do everything you can. But depending on economic situations, I mean, fear adds into all of those things. How am I going to feed my children if I'm on my own? I mean, I'm listening to these things that happen with women that are trying to get out of abusive situations all the time. And depending on where they live, they might have resources available to them. In other areas, they might not have resources available to them. So it really is about trying to understand all of those perspectives. But I think it's gauging how much fear alone is having that control. Because my mother was very fearful to leave my father. But then when she was younger, but then those things changed. And then it became very, very much tied to, well, I won't have as much financial freedom. I won't have, and she, again, I don't want to badmouth my mom. I'm just trying to explain Chris's perspective is, you can't tell your children how much money you have and how you have millions of dollars here and there. And then on the same breath say, I can't possibly take care of you on my own. When you're little, you kind of understand that. But then if you're buying all this expensive stuff and bragging about these things, and then still keeping your children in this very dangerous situation. Again, that was her own personal amount of fear in whatever ways kept her from leaving. And that happens in a lot of situations with abused women. Chris, I was able to look at those gray areas a lot more than Chris. And Chris used to say, I really wish I could look at it more like you can. Chris was very black and white about that. Chris was very much, it's all about money. It's all about materialism. You know, she could have easily left. And he's right in a lot of ways. But again, there's a psyche that gets built into women and men that are abused in that way. And it's
nuanced. It's nuanced and it's complex.
Yeah.
But
and
I think
the professional experience to try to say here publicly what everybody should do. All I can say is to try to gauge how much power you're giving to that fear and how much of it is legitimate, and you know, how much can you overcome, and how can you overcome it, and get every resource you possibly can, and to not be afraid to try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We one of the things I've been neglecting, we have people who are watching live, and this is amazing. It's amazing to me, but not to you. We have people who are watching from Germany, Brazil, Michigan, Indiana, Canada, Ohio. Let's see, where else?
Get to their questions.
Yes, I'm going to try to do that now. If I can find, I think I mentioned Mexico. Did I mention Mexico? I don't think I did. Mexico. I'm trying to scroll here to find a question that we can ask. One of the things that I did want to talk about is that the bus where Chris died is in this remote area of Alaska, or was in this remote area of Alaska. It's an iconic, it's almost a pilgrimage site. You've made the trek, but now the bus is not there anymore. So could you tell that story?
Yes. On June 18th of this year, the Department of Natural Resources of Alaska made their decision, and the decision was well within their rights. It was unfortunate and sad in a lot of ways, but it was their decision to make. They made the decision to remove the bus, and it's now in an undisclosed location being kept secure until they decide what's going to happen with it next. They are in negotiations with the University of Alaska's Museum of the North, and I do believe that's where the final home, the final resting place, as it were, of the bus will be. And so on that day, June 18th, I received a phone call. I was not aware that the bus was going to be removed. Received a phone call from the commissioner of the DNR letting me know that the bus had been extracted with a Chinook helicopter. And, you know, I was in my kitchen over there dealing with 8 zillion other things as always. And so it was a shock. And to the commissioner's credit, she's got a very busy job, especially this time of year. And she let me take the time to collect myself. And she explained to me why they had made their decision. And I was aware of the rescues that had happened. There had been 2 people that had drowned in the Tekwanika. And they just made the decision based on public safety that it was better to take the bus out. Plus, the bus had been vandalized a lot by some locals. I would say it was a minority in that area. However, unfortunately, shotguns can do a lot of damage. And they felt it was best to pull it out for the, you know, also to be able to preserve it for people who did want to honor Chris by visiting the bus. So it's sad that it's not still in the same location anymore, but I understand the reasoning behind it. And I put together a group called Friends of Bus 142, and people can find that online through social media and on the website. And we are a nonprofit organization that is working to assist. So the burden isn't on the local government of Alaska, as it should not be. This is a global story, to help restore the bus and to help it be placed in an exhibit in a way that is free access to people that want to go and visit it and honor Chris in that way. And also, I have some people on the team, Eric Halfaker, born and raised in Alaska, and we're putting together, people will see when, after the final announcement is made, when the agreement is solid between the museum, our website will be revamped, and on that we will have information about how they can visit the bus. The process we'll share with people, visually the process of it being restored and the exhibit being built, and we'll make sure to keep everyone in contact with that because it has become this global symbol to people for so many reasons. And Eric is also going to be publishing a few alternative hikes. Chris chose the Stampede Trail because it was so unknown and not well-traveled, and now it is well-known and well-traveled. And if people want to experience that raw and real Alaska that Chris was looking at, and if they want to honor him in that way, they're probably not going to go all the way to Alaska from Germany and all these other places that you mentioned just to go to a museum. They want to experience Alaska. So we're going to give them some tips and some advice on some beautiful hikes that they can make and the different levels of preparedness that you have to have, so they can go and experience that, Great White North that Chris talked about, and have that experience for themselves, but also be able to visit the bus. And
what was the experience like for you when you made that pilgrimage? And you've been there a couple of times, right?
Yeah, I've been there 3 times. I hiked in once, and I had gone by helicopter twice. Do we want to get into that? Do we want to? I hate to not be answering people's questions this far in.
Well, some of the questions we've already dealt with. Although people are from Belgium, Australia, Canada, mostly they're weighing in and saying hello. Some are asking you to speculate on, what Chris would have been doing now. You address that. So we've gotten to some of those questions.
The quick answer to that is I think he'd be a lot like John Krakauer.
And that means he'd be a writer and an adventurist, right?
I think that he would be someone of very high integrity, somebody that's very honest. And yeah, I think that he would do everything he would have created a job for himself that put him outdoors doing adventurous things as much as he could. And that's something that, I don't want to speak for John, but I know John very well. And that's something that John's did. I think he would have found himself a really cool chick to marry like John did that would put up with his adventurous side. If Chris had become a father, he would have been a wonderful father. That's as much as I can speculate. If people want to know about what Chris would think of the current politics, I don't get into that. But as far as his character and the foundation of the kind of person that he was.
Let's talk a little bit about the creative process, because that is an area that, I don't know, maybe you've been, the book that you wrote, not Into the Wild Truth, but The Wild Truth.
Well, that's the title. I'm fortunate it's been published in 7 countries, and I think 2 of the countries made their title Into the Wild Truth. So depending on where the Italian version I know is Into the Wild Truth. So depending on where they are, but it should be pretty easy to find, I think.
Yeah. Well, the experience of writing that, and is that what it is that led you to become a manuscript editor, a ghostwriter, dealing with screenplays? Indirectly or directly, has that had an impact on your own creativity in terms of writing?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think, people keep saying, when are you going to write? In fact, you ask me that all the time. When are you going to write your next book? I don't have my desire now. I enjoy writing. I enjoy the creative process very much, but I am so thankful to my editor, Jenna Landfree, for her help in helping me digest. When you're writing about something so emotional, you need someone, like Jenna would read the chapter I sent and she would say, well, tell me a little bit more about this, or, you're too angry here, or you're not angry enough. I know there's more. And you kind of need someone to kind of help you balance that. And she really was in the early stages. She was such a good writing coach, and she taught me how to write better. And I've really enjoyed doing that for other people so much. I enjoy helping people tell their stories. And I work in all genres, so a lot of people come to me with their true stories that they want help with, and they kind of need to be coached in how to write better, and just sort of the mechanisms that you're a writer, a prolific writer, you have several books out yourself, and being able to help them, and whether it's fiction or nonfiction, sometimes it's a fictional story, and I have a client who we edited a romantic comedy together. I mean, it's a empowering women's kind of story, but it is a romantic comedy, and it was a lot of fun for me to be everything I've edited. Not everything I've edited before that, but the majority is a lot of serious stuff, a lot of heavy stuff. And it was really fun to work on that project, and we revamped her entire manuscript. She's an excellent storyteller, and we just worked on the writing together, and she's very good. And she just got a 2-book deal with one of the imprints of Random House, and so that was great. I've worked on a film script for someone who is an excellent poet and a good writer, and he's even delved into songwriting now. And that one in particular is a personal story. He uses a protagonist, and it's fictionalized, but it's based on his life. And I'm ghostwriting a book for a Marine now about the issues that he's dealt with, and stories about how he is this tough Marine, but he found Jesus Christ, and he wanted help in flushing all of that out. So long story short, I apologize. I really like to be behind the scenes. And even in working with, when I was consulting with John didn't need any help writing, obviously. He was a great mentor to me with my writing. But in order for him to understand Chris, he talked to me a lot while he was writing the book. And then I was a scriptwriter on the film Into the Wild. And so that kind of opened up that new level of experience. And then in writing my book, I just really enjoy the editing process. I enjoy the creative process. I really enjoy helping people tell their stories. And I really like the fact that then they go and promote that. And I'm not much of a self-promoter, so I don't, as you know.
You're very shy. I'm really surprised.
I'm not shy. I just don't, I'm not shy. I just,
Are you an introvert?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
I'm just
well, then what are you?
I'm just not, when I wrote my book, I figured it did well, it hit the bestseller list, and I figured, okay, I don't have to try to promote it, because anyone that finds Into the Wild is going to find the wild truth. But, I don't think about things like SEO and on web, and there's so much information about Into the Wild that it would take tons of stuff before my book might pop up. And so I know that the rest of the story has helped so many people. So I do want people to know that the wild truth is out there and accessible. It's free to read at a lot of public libraries. It's easy to find once you know to find it. And I'm just not one that posts a lot about it or promotes. I am a very good cheerleader for other people that want to promote their work. But I'm glad that I don't have to go be the face of their work. It's their work. It's their book, and they're going to go and promote that. And my book tour was lovely. I got to go to different countries. Everyone was so incredibly, the people that I met were so kind. But I know that my purpose in life outside of this work, I feel like this is out there and people can get it. And my day-to-day purpose in life is to deal with
talking about this,
deal with things in my own household, my own community. And, again, I have a special needs daughter, and the most important thing that I can do in this life is to raise my daughters. I have two girls, and to raise them to be able to be, self-empowered women in the world. And my youngest that has Down syndrome, I have to spend a lot of energy every day. I homeschool her, and it's incredibly important for the end goal to be that she can survive without me someday, and be safe and be happy and have a purposeful life that she enjoys and is happy. And I have to find that balance between taking too much time being involved with rebuilding a bus across the country. And I am so grateful to all the people that reach out to me. I want everyone to know that when you've sent me messages, I read everything I get. I can't always reply to everyone because tens of thousands. I can't possibly reply to everybody, but I read everything myself. And I am so grateful to everyone that has helped keep Chris's story alive, because it helps the pain be a little bit less every day to know that that so many people are encouraged by Chris's story and by our story.
It sounds to me that really what you're describing is a certain humility and a certain caring, that you're other oriented. And that is quite a compelling component to have as part of your life.
I just think it's what life's about. I mean, I'm proud that I produced a book and wrote a book. I'm more proud that I produced 2 daughters, and I have to, the book's already done and it's going to live past me, and it'll be here speaking to people when I'm dead and no longer able to speak to people. And my daughters, I want them to be able to live their best life and teach their children to be good people and purposeful people. And so it's all about finding that balance. I mean, that's what I want to spend most of my time on.
So you mentioned people getting in touch with you. You have a website and you also have a Facebook page. I suppose both of those would be fair game.
Yeah, the website, I'm in the process. We really need to revamp and edit it down. I don't have anything on my website yet about my editing and writing work because, as you know, I don't really promote that too much. But I want to do more of that work, especially with COVID. I'm not out lecturing at universities, not doing keynotes as we've done in the past, simply because people aren't hosting those things now. So I'll have more time to be able to edit and write. And yeah, I encourage people that are interested in knowing more about the bus to go on to the friendsofbus142.com, because they can sign up for reminders, or they can sign up for like new updates whenever something new is happening with the bus. We'll give them that information. We're not going to sell their information. We're not going to flood their inbox with crap. We're just going to send them the information they'd want to know. And people can reach me through there on social media, friendsofbus142.com. But there's also on Facebook, you can see there. I'm Carine McCandless, Into the Wild Truth. If they search that on Facebook, they'll find me there. And I read all of those comments. I don't have an assistant that does this stuff with me. I just, I have some help with the emails and things that come in, but if you get an answer from me, it's from me.
Now, if they contact you through management@CarineMcCandless.com, what happens?
So those will be sent to me. Specifically, if people want help with telling their story, if they need an editor and they're looking to contact me with regards to those things, whether it be books or film, if they have a story that they need help telling, if they have information that they need to get to me. Again, I read everything I get. I can't respond to everyone, but if somebody wants to reach out and tell me their story and share something about Chris with me, they can send it to me there, and I will absolutely read it.
I'm looking at the chat to see what people have been saying. There's one person who said that he's chatted in from the UK. This is his birthday, and he always raises a glass to Chris on this day.
Thank you.
One person asked, apparently you had some sort of a journal that you left in the bus.
Yes.
And did that get saved when they moved the bus? Did they move everything? Well, looks like you're going to do a little crowd control there.
Sorry, I've got that one. So this one is the one that I left in the bus when I went with John the first time, which was August 2007, I believe. And I left it behind, and there are some messages. Oh yeah, August 2007. So there are some messages also from my brothers and sisters and Chris's other siblings in here. And a lot of visitors. I mean, the amount of messages that are in this are pretty incredible, multiple languages. But there's also probably, I don't know, a half dozen or 10 more journals that were in the bus that the let's see, it was the Army National Guard that paired up with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources to remove the bus. And they were very respectful in saving all of those things, and they did send those to me. So people that I've seen pictures of people that have visited the bus and things that they left in their videos where they're showing things that they left in the bus, and a picture, like a loved one that they held up that was in the suitcase. I have that now. It's right here. And I have Chris's backpack and his rifle and the bear skull that was left in. I have all of those things right here in my office.
Okay. Somebody asked if you have how you feel about the way the movie depicted your parents, and if you've been able to keep in touch with any of the people involved in the movie.
Yeah, I'm still in touch with a lot of people, and I think Sean did a really good job. I mean,
Sean Penn as the director, right?
Yes, it was very important to him to be authentic. At the beginning of that movie, you see someone dropping Chris off. If you read Into the Wild, it's about Jim Gallion being the person that picked Chris up when he was hitchhiking and dropped him off at the head of the Santee Trail. And a lot of people don't know because it's not advertised, but the person that you see in the movie dropping Emil Hirsch, who's playing Chris, that is Jim Gallion. That is the same.
Oh, really?
That is the same man that is the last person to ever see Chris alive. So obviously he's much older in the movie than he was when he dropped Chris off. But and that's Sean did that not to be a wow factor, because most people don't know that. But it was just sort of this nuanced way of showing authenticity, of being authentic, not necessarily showing it. But that this is going to be a real story, and it's going to honor Chris and be true. And there's a couple things that I would have liked to have seen differently, and I write about that in the book. But when you make movies, I learned a lot about that. And if the movie is made about someone who you love more than anyone else in the world, and you care about how they're depicted, and there's only 2 scenes in the entire movie that you wish were different, that's pretty good. Okay.
Well, I mean, you and I could go on and on and on talking about Chris, about this, and I'm hoping we'll be able to reconnect and do this and go in some other directions as well. You've been incredibly generous with your time, considering all the other things that you have going on in your life. There are people who have weighed in from Poland, New Zealand. I mean, this is just incredible. I mean, it's his.
Are there any other questions that you think we should get to? I mean,
most people are weighing in and wishing you well and letting you know that the Into the Wild and Chris's story has resonated with them, and so they're and you'll probably be able to read some of these afterwards. But in many cases, people are just saying hello and thank you, which I would certainly echo. Is there any? I think that it'll all be on the page, on the Facebook page, so that all of them are there. I mean, you're a fascinating person, and I'm so glad. Believe it. And I mean, I'm just glad that we've had a chance to meet and to stay friends over the years.
Sure.
And
I have a lot of respect for you, John.
Well, thank you, and it's mutual. I mean, is there any?
I'm happy to do this again. People, they have questions. I'm happy to. This was a pretty simple way to connect. It's easy to do right in my own office, and I appreciate everybody's patience with my rambling. I'll probably have a clear head on other days and probably be able to speak more specifically, eloquently, and I would love to be able to answer everyone's questions.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are wishing you well, and I certainly do. And this has just been wonderful. It's so good to connect with you again, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Sure.